But what you can do as an engineer, regardless of whose responsibility it is, it doesn't matter. It's in your best interest to have things clear. And you can try to help your manager to make things clear for you. You can ask, so like, what are the expectations? Like, let's say, depending on how staff are in your company, we, for example, have these yearly rewards.
Yes.
And then you can ask, okay, so first, it's good to ask to understand how these things even work. Often engineers look at them as some mysterious stuff that somehow happens.
Compensation.
Yes,
right.
yes.
Like, so what you're saying is it's okay for engineers to ask how compensation process happens in the company.
Yes. How works, how rewards, whatever it is.
By the way.
Often, maybe some companies are keeping it a secret. In Microsoft, it absolutely is not a secret, but I see so many times that engineers look at it as some like mysterious voodoo magic. And I'm like just surprised, like, no, it's not. This works this way. And you can.
I agree.
Engineers can ask their managers to understand how this works.
Yes, 100%. By the way, in Pactum, we have the same. It's transparent process. And I always even encourage direct reports to ask. And I would even like tell myself like how it happens. And they, 100% of the time, they appreciate it a lot once they see the transparency.
Yeah.
Hi, welcome to Map for Engineers podcast. I had a pleasure to talk with Joel. Joel is engineering manager in Microsoft. I know Joel by working with him in Starship Technologies, the company which develops self-driving robots. And with Joel, we explored the topic of growing as an engineer. And we explored it from the very early phases, when you start as a junior engineer, what to focus on there. And then as you progress in your career, what skills are important for your growth. For example, not only technical skills become important, but communication, aligning across stakeholders, understanding of complex systems, and last but not least, understanding your product and the business impact you're making. And we also talked about the topics related to the growth, which are important in any phase of your career. For example, honing good relationship with your manager, being active when you have one-on-ones with your manager. We explore topics like talking with your manager about compensation, about bringing clarity, for example, of performance reviews. And also we discussed from managers' perspective what is important. It's important to bring clarity to your direct reports, to bring clarity on expectations that you have of them. And on the engineering side, it's also important not to treat your manager as a punching bag. This was one point that you all brought out that I really liked. He said, if you come with a complaining mindset as an engineer to your manager, it won't get you far. And you should not treat your manager as a punching bag. Instead, come to your manager with a growth mindset and showing that you are capable of solving problems, grabbing initiatives, and taking responsibility. On the later part of the podcast, we touched on the topics such as the role of engineering managers. Should they be coding? Should they not be coding? And maybe both options are fine and can coexist in different companies and in different phases in the same company, for example, as the complexity level of your systems grow. We scratched the surface on talking about generative AI in the context of engineering career and growth. And maybe a spoiler alert, we both agreed and aligned that Gen AI just automates coding, but it will not replace engineers in the foreseeable future, because the role of engineer, first and foremost, is to solve business problems, to build a great product. And last but not least, we touched on a very important topic, which is close to my heart, is the responsibility of senior engineers teaching younger junior engineers. I think it's a very important topic in our industry. The amount of engineers grow every year, and those who have more years of experience are in minority. And it's very important for those who have more years of experience and more knowledge to teach those who have less experience. And this should be an industry standard and common in cultures across companies. And Joel wrapped it up very nicely. He said, it doesn't even matter whether you have seniors or juniors. Engineers should always share knowledge with each other. There should always be a knowledge sharing culture. And this also enables growth for everyone in the engineering department. All right. So welcome to Map for Engineers.
Thank you for having me.
So I know we chatted with you what would be a good theme to talk about. And I asked you, well, what would you like to talk about? And what are you passionate about? And you said that you would like to share your experience, or let's say all the knowledge and experience you got related to the theme of growing as an engineer, right? Engineering growth, related to all aspects, right? From mistakes that, let's say, junior engineers do, or we all did maybe, or, some of us, and different ones, right? And we learn from them. And then I guess growth on different levels, like right from junior to mid to senior. And then you have a question of different paths, going to work as a manager, or again, growing to staff. Then there is a question of hiring. And before we go to all of that, maybe you can share your path and journey of growing as an engineer. Where are you coming from? How you got exposed to software engineering and how you have been growing in your career. So that would be, I think, a good start.
Yeah. I can start with introduction as my journey, and then we'll go from there. So I studied computer science. And even before that, actually, in elementary school, it's like first 8 grades. I don't know in which grade, maybe like 4th or something. We had this informatics class where we were learning about, how to use Word and this like random stuff. Mm-hmm. But since my father was dealing with the IT stuff, and then I knew how to do this stuff that we were learning there, and I was like this little kid who was like, oh, I know all this stuff. Then my teacher once asked me, do you know how to do this like programming in Logo that is like competition? And I was like, yeah, sure. I didn't know anything about it. And then I came home in the evening from school and to my father, and I'm going to competition. I need to learn about this thing.
Fake it till you make it.
And then he printed me like on paper some like book about it, and I started like randomly like programming something with the Logo. This is this language where you have this little turtle,
right?
And you can give instructions like move, lift the pencil, then move, turn, rotate, and then you can draw stuff. There was actually things where you can like create functions to do like calculations and whatnot. But initial stuff was like to draw different things and whatnot. And
I was not exposed to that.
That's how I first started. And I actually really liked it. And then, but later on, I started computer science. So compared to your previous guest, I remember that he was saying that he didn't really like this like coding as coding. Mm-hmm. But I really enjoyed writing code. Mm-hmm. And also like understanding how this stuff in the background works. One of the like very interesting things in uni for me was this automata theory, which goes like to how we got to like Turing machines, and eventually then today's architectures, mm-hmm. and how this theory of languages, programming languages mm-hmm. themselves works and so forth. We were like building even compilers, and I really enjoyed this stuff. And I was constantly writing some code, like doing like random stuff, and I really liked it, which I later on like a bit semi-changed. But yeah, this is how I sort of started, and then I was like a bit semi-intern and working in some companies a bit
in Croatia, right?
In Croatia, yes. Mm-hmm. I'm originally from Croatia, mm-hmm. even though I live in Estonia here with you, also for about 10 years, mm-hmm. and. There you cannot like work when you're a student officially.
Right.
But yeah, they had some programs where they give us some kind of scholarship and you then like work, whatever. So I did like a bit of that, but then came this Erasmus, how I came mm-hmm. to Estonia.
Right.
And I didn't have funds to finance that. So I was looking for a company that I can work for remotely from Estonia. And almost none of them wanted to do that. But one company said, okay, like since it was still like beginning of summer, let's see over the summer in Croatia how it goes. And then if it's okay, then you can continue remotely. And that's the only reason why I was able to come to Estonia.
Right.
But then when I came to Estonia, I went to this crazy startup bus hackathon where
I heard about that.
Yeah, we were going to Vienna that year.
Was it Garage 48 organized?
I don't actually remember.
But you were hacking on the bus, literally.
Right? Yes. Bus was going for like 3 days from Tallinn to Vienna.
Right.
And you are creating some product and writing code, whatever, on the bus. Yes. It was like a crazy experience. But I met there a guy, an Estonian guy who introduced me to a guy from his company. And I had an interview and I started working there like normally in Estonia, like 2 months after I came to Estonia. And I was like, wow, like the salary is much bigger than in Croatia. And you actually can be officially employed. You get extra days for being a student. So it was like very cool. But from this like growth perspective stuff. So yeah, I liked writing code a lot. So I was like playing with it around, experimenting with lots of different technologies and whatnot. I'm thinking like how to fit like some stuff like here to not just like blabber around. There is like lots of story.
Go for it, for whatever you want to mention first, and then we will see where it leads us.
Like later on, what I've seen is since nowadays this IT stuff is very popular, and you have like every random person going into it, and a lot of motivation comes from salaries are good. It's very nice there.
Yeah.
So lots of people go into it. But I see lots of young people who also like kind of like have different expectations. They don't care about IT. They don't like this stuff. They're just like, this is like any other job. I just go and I get lots of money. Right. And they then feel entitled and they don't have drive and they just want to get lots of money.
I'm so happy you mentioned that. Actually, in fact, and you mentioned that in uni, you really enjoyed it, right? In fact, when, I started uni quite early. I started university when I was 16 years old. And the reason why I went to computer science and informatics was exactly because I discovered programming for myself when I was 14. I just loved it. I realized, yes, this is what I want to do. So I got this, drive to explore, learn. And honestly, at that time, I didn't even know how much do engineers earn. Is it like whatever? What are the salaries? I just pursued it because I liked it. And I saw I have certain aptitude for that. It kind of comes to me naturally. But as you said, I also observe over time, especially now that IT became even more popular with the rise of AI and other things. Yes, you're right. There is a surge of people who just go for money, but they don't have not enough, let's say, not even motivation, but they don't have inherent interest to explore and learn about engineering and software engineering.
Yeah. I mean, just to be like fair, not everybody's like that. There are people who also maybe care about it, but still, I see that lots of people are trying to like negotiate, get better deals, etc. And when you are like very early in career, I would say your main priority should be to get to the place where you can get relevant experience, where you can learn and grow as much as you can. Because when you have that, you can work almost wherever you want. Everybody will want you.
Yeah.
And you will have great salary. And if you start early with getting good salaries, you will get used to them. If you're in a place where you don't get relevant experience, years will pass and then you will apply to company with X years of experience where X is decent, like 5+ or whatever. You will say I'm senior, team lead, whatever, but you will not understand anything.
Yeah, I agree.
Like one example I can give, which is might be like very shocking to some, maybe not to others. I'm currently working in Microsoft, and I'm part of the group that is setting some standards for hiring for engineers. And for example, for this algorithmic interview, which there is lots of controversy. Lots of engineers don't like it and say like, why do I need to know algorithms and whatnot? Yeah.
By the way, to interject, I will be happy to reflect on this different hiring experiences because as you said, you're involved in hiring in Microsoft, right? And I'm involved in hiring in Pactum because I established the tech hiring pipeline. So yeah, I'm very curious to hear about.
Sounds cool.
But please continue. So yeah, you were talking about algorithmic interview and the controversies around it.
Just to give the example to like story that we were talking about. So yeah, one thing is that overall like people say, why do I need to know algorithms, etc. But the way that I usually like ask questions there is, I don't put anything where you need to know any specific algorithm.
Yeah.
Nothing special. Yeah. For most of them, you don't even need to know like details of data structures. Yes. If you could just like use bare minimum or like some like, I don't know, dictionaries, hash maps.
You just need to think through the problem and be able to problem solve, right?
You need to have the fundamental and you need to have them very good like tool in your toolbox and you need to be able to use them. And I found like different things for which you can very easily with very simple questions trigger to realize when somebody really doesn't understand.
Yes.
And I had people with like 10 years of experience. I'm not exaggerating. Yeah. Like seniors, whatever, with impressive
that couldn't solve simple problems.
And this, I can give you the example of simple problem.
Yeah.
The simple problem was basically you have an array of whatever, let's say numbers.
I have similar story, by the way. It seems like, but let's go.
Array of numbers, and you need to find the element that doesn't exist in the array. Like this is like now simplified because there are many things that don't exist in an array, of course, but let's say you have two arrays and find the ones that don't exist in the second one from the first one. So that you have something that you are searching, but you need to verify that it doesn't exist inside. And I specifically say, write it with two loops and write them yourself. So they don't need to think about algorithm, nothing, just pure brute force.
Yes. Not even optimizing yet, right?
People get lost with this if inside of those two loops. Because it's easy if you need to find something that's inside, because then you have if. Did I find it? Yes, cool, done. But if you need to see like something that you will not find, then even if it's not equal to, it still might be there later. So you need to pass the whole thing to make sure. So they need to have some extra variable or whatever outside of this inner loop
to keep track.
And this breaks them.
Yeah.
It's so simple thing. And no matter what engineers say about knowing algorithms or whatnot, somebody who is regularly writing code, this kind of task, in my opinion, should be something that they can do dead drunk in their sleep and not like something that they have to even prepare for.
Yeah, I agree. And this is again to reflect on the topic that, let's say, if you are starting your career, focus on the fundamentals, right? And fundamentals doesn't mean you need to be a hardcore assembler programmer or anything like that, but just understand the fundamentals of simple programming concepts, right? Starting from the for loops, how arrays work, simple data structures, right? Linked lists, binary search trees, binary search, what it is, like simple understanding of complexities there, because it does help, right? I mean, you cannot be later an architect without understanding these things. I'll tell you, I had quite similar experience, and I'll share it. Again, it's not about, we are not here to mock people, right? It's just reflecting some realities, right, that we see in hiring. I think I'm pretty sure that you respectfully gave feedback to the person.
No, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Why they, let's say, didn't pass interview. Same was for my case. So yeah, I just want to say to listeners that we're not here just to, laugh on candidates, but it's a very relevant point. And I think those who listen, especially those who start their career, yes, I agree. Focusing on fundamentals is important. One example I had, again, senior guy, 10 years of experience. When I said, like, what are your ambitions? What do you want to do in Pactum? He said, I want to be a big architecting systems. I said, sure. And then we talked I wanted to see if he understands simple things like arrays. And I said to him a simple question. I said, imagine you have a huge memory in your laptop, like imagine a few terabytes of memory, of RAM actually. And you assign in your program, you have a fixed big array. Let's say you created an array of 1 billion elements of integers.
Mm-hmm.
And now you know a specific index, let's say number, whatever, in the middle of the array, I don't know, 500th million item, and you want to access this in the array. What will be the complexity of that? Will it be fast? Will it be slow? How fast or slow? What's the complexity of this? And he said, well, it depends on the index. If it's in the beginning of array, it's fast. If it's in the end of the array, it's slow. You see, right? The person wants to architect big systems without even understanding what are arrays. So I think it's very easy to lose touch with things if you if you don't understand fundamentals. There's no point on going forward. But starting with let's say your early days, and then you said a good point that it's important for engineers when they start their career to focus on experience, and not focus on getting highest salary. So you should optimize for growth and learning, right? Mm-hmm. So be exposed to, this is my reflection. I'm curious what you would say. You need to ensure that you are among very bright people, so very bright engineers, because this will actually have a big impact on yourself, right? Absolutely. If you surround yourself with very smart engineers, you are very likely to be successful. So you should optimize for that. What other things you would say you should optimize for when you search for these first jobs? And actually not only first, but honestly, any. But
To be fair also to people, I know that there might be people who are in tough situations and you need money for something and whatnot. But as long as you can afford it, whatever extra money somebody offers, it's worth zero compared to even tiny bit of extra better environment you can have for learning. Usually people deal with more than one stuff. So even those who are not in IT, you probably know whether you deal with your sport or learn to draw or dance or whatever. You can notice these things where when in different environment that you are in, how much you can grow and learn compared to not so great environments. And it's the same thing in IT. If you are in a company where there are mediocre engineers, not saying anything bad about people who are not as good as somebody else,
then you'll become mediocre.
But yeah, if you are in an environment where people don't know much, they don't have much experience, you are going to learn from them. That is going to be stuff that you learn. We learn lots of stuff from our culture since you're a baby. Lots of stuff that how you are, what you know is from how you grew up in your kindergarten with your family members, etc. That shapes you. Mm-hmm. And when you jump into the new world, whichever one it is, here IT that we talk about, if you surround yourself with people who are not so great, this is going to become your default, your standard. And that will be your normal, and it will take a while, even after you maybe get into a better place, for you to unlearn that and figure out, okay, this is actually not how you do stuff.
Mm-hmm. So may I ask, imagine to make it more fun, or asking, what would you advise yourself again? Let's say you know this question, if you were to go back 10 years and you would talk to yourself, what would you, which note would you give it to yourself?
So, buy a lot of Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's one. That's one.
But from engineering stuff, what I usually, whenever these kind of topics come in, I usually say, I don't know, I wouldn't change anything, because all the experience is some experience, and you can learn something from it. Yes. I had my not great decisions that I made, but in reflection to them, I can then understand some stuff better. Somebody who goes through this perfect path where you have amazing environment, everything is great, you're learning, you are developing, you cannot understand those people who are different.
Yes.
And for me, in my role as EM, this is very useful, because I have people from tons of different backgrounds, different paths.
EM for engineering manager.
Yes,
right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's if I would look things only from perspective of some perfect path, I totally wouldn't be able to understand or help anyhow you use and grow the people that are different. So from that perspective, I think it was still useful, and I wouldn't honestly change, or I don't know, what would make a better decision.
I can honestly say the same. When I reflect on my career, I first started in Wise, and honestly, I'll maybe describe my experience like this. I loved Wise a lot. Like, it was such a great culture, and many things were done so well there. But after around 3 years in Wise, maybe a bit less, but around 3 years, I went to Starship Technologies. Mm-hmm. And the reason I went, it was purely from my interest perspective. I wanted to work in a company where AI was competitive advantage and where it's actually, let's say, bread and butter of the company, because I got curious about machine learning at the time and I wanted to explore this more. And one thing I realized is that companies are completely different. Like, people are different, cultures are different, everything is different. And first, I remember my first reaction was to say, oh, but things were different in Wise, like, why are we not doing it this way? But honestly, I was a fool because I didn't understand the context. Like, Starship had processes and things and culture developed in a certain way. Well, because the problems were different, domain was different. So everything was different. And I think it's one more perspective when you have a complete shift of context, or let's say you switch a job. The worst thing you can do is start like from the beginning to criticize right away without understanding deeply. And you really have to understand, observe, and but yes, then you get a gift of, oh, now you can compare. Now you can see these things worked well here. These things didn't work well here. And slowly, maybe through example, or maybe by bringing example or by leading the way, you can bring a change. But right, you don't do it from the position of just criticizing the current practices of the company. But this comparison that you get, it's very useful, right? And I remember even some things that might seem like negative experiences because, let's say, I don't know, you might have some clashes with people, cultural clashes. If you come it from the mindset that you can grow of it, and look at it as a problem that is given to you, that if you solve it, it's like a gift to you, literally, because through problem solving, you will grow as an engineer. And yeah, what you said, like, I wouldn't, for myself, like, I wouldn't want to take any experience away from myself, even whatever, positive, negative. I would even say that there's those negative or hard experiences were some of the most fundamental ones that helped me to grow.
Yeah. And this is another great point besides like fundamentals and focusing on growth, is that even if you don't end up with the best environment that you can have,
you can still learn from it.
Whatever experience you have, exactly, you can learn something from it. As much as you maybe don't like it and hate it and it's like horrible and you want to complain, you can learn from it. So take your time to grieve, but reflect later, because it's every experience is invaluable.
But can I ask on this topic? Because I think there is some issue here as well. Like, people can get stuck, right? Stuck in the company or stale. Mm-hmm. Imagine, and it's about also our emotional blockers, let's say, or it's called like normalizing the experience. Imagine you have mediocre engineers around you, culture is so, but you kind of are slowly getting used to it. You don't know better, but you feel something is wrong. So you're kind of feel the staleness or being stuck. What would you suggest would be, and it can be whether you're a junior engineer or a senior engineer, what would you suggest to do or what would be your way of unblocking this if it happened to you?
We can start with standard engineering response. It depends.
Yeah.
But if you notice that anything is wrong for whatever reason, whether it's, I don't know, what you mentioned or something else, like, look for what's out there. That's one option. Another one is try to understand, like, what is it that is not okay for you.
Understand the root cause.
Yes. Or like
reflect
a bit better, at least, like, what's the point? Because otherwise,
you might get the same problem in the next company.
Exactly.
Right?
Like, you think
if you haven't solved the root
search for
cause
another place, and then you can just hop around and constantly have the same problem. So it's worth to like try to see, like, what is actually the issue? Like, why do I have it? And it doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. Just the point of thinking about it means that whenever you make a decision to change something, helps you that you then see, how that impacted the stuff that you thought about before. Because if you didn't, like, you don't know, like, something happened, okay, now it's like this, now it's like that. But if you think about it before, make a decision, and then see, like, how it changed, you can learn more from it so that you can make better decisions going forward.
I agree.
It's a very generic answer, unfortunately, but...
No, that's a very good one. But do you believe, have you heard of the phrase, people don't leave companies, people leave their bosses?
I have heard, yes.
What do you think of this?
I think that...
Of course, it's not an absolute statement, but let's say as a general wisdom, folklore wisdom.
Yeah, people like to have this kind of like nice sayings that they can relate to, and then they like go like, everything is like that. Just like somebody likes one football club and that's the best one and everybody else sucks. And here, I don't know, it sounded cool to me in the past, and I still would say that yes, definitely. If you have like a manager, boss, whatever you call them, you really cannot like work with them. Of course, that can be a very valid reason to leave. But there is lots of gray area inside. It's not like black and white, that you either have like an angel or you have a devil. And I would say that it's not always that decision is made purely for your manager. It impacts it, but I don't know. I wouldn't say that that's the main reason. I haven't done some statistical research, so I have no idea. But I would say it's a spectrum. So it impacts it, but it depends on.
It depends. I agree. Yeah. But what do you say? I'm curious if we can talk a little bit about, because I think it relates to growth a lot, is relationship between, let's say in early career anyway, you are as individual contributor. Like, let's talk about converting to manager maybe a bit later. But let's say, especially early in your career, but even later, let's say you're individual contributor, engineer, your relationship, let's say inside a team and with your manager, your lead, your boss, whatever people call. Can we go into this a little bit more? Because I think this is where a lot of learnings can be drawn. So for example, because I don't know if you would agree, but this relationship of engineer and your manager, it's a very important one. And what would you say engineers should do from their side to build a very good connection with their lead, and what lead should do to build a very good connection to help the engineer to grow? And maybe we can talk about the growth it's a two-way street, because when we have one-on-one, let's say you're my manager, it's also important for you to get feedback from me, for you to grow.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And of course, for me to get a feedback from you. So maybe you could say your thoughts about this relationship and how to create a good one that will enable high growth.
This is again like very broad topic. You can say like lots of stuff, and it very much depends on what kind of person you are and what kind of person your manager is. But if I try to like condense it to something like
you can talk
generic,
even about your own experience. Let's say you have direct reports, right? You're engineering manager in Microsoft. So what things work well for you when you have, and of course you can talk in abstract, not certain names, but still your own stories or
Sure. Well, I would say that like I learned a lot more about that after becoming a manager, when you have your direct reports and then you also have your manager. You don't usually think too much about it when you are an IC. But I remember when I was an IC, you first look at your manager as that's some separate entity somewhere there. You don't really understand how all this stuff works, but they are like your person who decides everything, and you need to like please them and whatnot.
They're a father figure or a god figure.
Something, and it's kind of it depends, like they're like how you look at that. From one perspective, you also like have a bit of like fear towards them, because they're like this like big person there somewhere imaginary. You put them on some pedestal, but in the end, they're just like a normal person, just like you are. And it makes it a lot easier to have more normal relationship if you see them that way. And I know that this is easier to say like this, but it's different when you are in the situation.
Because in some sense, you as engineer, especially in early career, you expect your lead to solve problems for you, like almost like, let's say that, it's easy to offload responsibility from yourself to your lead for certain problems, or how would you say it manifests the fact that you view them as, as a kind of higher entity, as you said?
But this again, maybe also, depends on your personality. For me, it was more like I looked at them, okay, I need to do like everything perfect in their eyes. And you have like this, like a little bit of fear towards
fear and a lot of pleasing, right? Versus critical thinking, let's say, right?
And that might not be the same for everybody. Right. The different people have.
But let's say there is such anti-pattern.
For me, it was like that, yes. And then there are probably others who can relate. Yeah. And those who can't as well.
So let's say one piece of maybe advice or reflection on it is try to think critically and just view your manager as, well, a person, of course, who is here to help you.
Exactly.
But you kind of are together in it, and this person will not automatically solve things for you, and they will also make mistakes, maybe certain mistakes.
Yes.
And if you have some feedback for them, you should be able to give it. And also maybe when they ask you something and well, maybe you shouldn't do it, you should be able to challenge them, right? Or have a constructive discussion, right? So the power dynamics shouldn't be only in one way, where it's kind of very common in Japanese or Asian cultures, where you try to please your manager or boss, but not really have like more constructive or more interesting dynamics. So
this is a very good point that you mentioned also about this like critical thinking and also like challenging stuff, asking more questions. If you have this like little bit of like fear, then
your mind will shut down, right?
If things don't make sense, you will just like listen what your manager says, and you will say like, okay. And then later you will think, wait, but this doesn't make sense. But okay, let me just pass through it. And I have seen
this is the lost opportunity of growth. Right?
Yes.
Both for manager and you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I have unfortunately seen like many different companies that manager often doesn't know. And for manager also, it's sometimes hard to say, I don't know. So they say stuff like vaguely on purpose so that it sounds like they're saying something, but...
So lesson one for managers, if you don't know, admit it. There's no point to be pretentious about knowing everything, right?
Yeah.
Because you're just in the same boat as, your engineer and you don't know everything.
Because lots of those questions are hard and not defined, especially like... In Microsoft, we have these defined paths for your like levels of the engineers, and there is some documents describing what which level is. And even though lots of people disagree, in my opinion, this document is just vague enough so you can fit almost anything in any definition.
This is the document on career path?
Yes. And I'm not criticizing it. It's better than having nothing.
Right.
But it's really hard problem to define a very clear line. What's level X and what's level Y?
Right.
Like how do you define this when you have like million different criteria that you can judge person on?
Yeah. It's subjective. Let's say
it's subjective. Yes. So if I as an engineer come to you as my manager, look, I'm now like level X and I want to go to level Y. Like what do I need to do? That's a really hard question for you. And yes, that's your job maybe to help me to get there, but this is not simple and you cannot like give me like very simple answer. Right. And managers often then when they are like, they have no idea how to give very clear answer, and then they philosoph something very vaguely so that neither you nor manager understand what it actually is, and they feel like, okay, I got away from this situation.
But let's talk about it, because this is part of the relationship between engineer and the manager, is especially if the engineer is hungry to grow.
Yes.
And I've had this situation in my career where I actually felt like I'm senior engineer already. And I asked my manager, like, look, I want to be promoted to senior engineer. It was not as much about promotion, but as about getting more responsibilities, right? I was like, I feel I'm ready. Look, I did this. I feel I'm ready for this. And then they were like, I'm not sure. Let's think. But then I really kept pushing in a respectful way. But what I said is, look, I understand. I'm not saying it should be today, right? I'm happy to learn and grow. Maybe we can have a meeting. And it was with him and one more guy, also, let's say, one of high-level engineers, managers, leads in the company. And we were three of us. And on the whiteboard, they actually wrote down the points, even I would say quite exact deliverables that I would have to do to kind of, well, achieve the promotion. And I was very happy with this, and it was very respectful. I was not saying, give it to me now. So it's not about ultimatums. I think the worst thing you can do is play ultimatum game. This is like, you pretty much kill yourself in that exact moment you say ultimatum. Like that's game over, almost, I would say. So rather what you should do is say, look, I want to grow. I want to grow. Please help me to grow. So, and I know you don't have all the answers for me, right? So you don't expect managers like to give you it on the plate, but maybe we can discuss what could be some things that you feel I should be doing better, let's say. And of course, it's a gradient that I could do better for me to, hopefully achieve this goal. And maybe we check in later in 3 months, for example, or 2 months. What do you think about like this kind of dynamics? Or of course, I understand if it's a big company, Microsoft, it has its own performance process and review.
Our stuff is like very different there, but not because of the performance stuff, but also because of my specific theme and stuff that like we do, because we don't have this like very small breakdown tasks that you do for like few hours and then you take a next task.
Yes, of course.
And so that you would say,
you have big epics, right? Or big topics.
You have big stuff that you do. So even somebody who is not like a senior engineer works on something, and then the difference between senior is how much babysitting do they need.
Yes.
Like, so to say, like whether they can, of course they don't need to know like all the answers, not even senior engineers know, but if they can like figure things out, if they can like ask somebody, and get things completed, get things done, without needing somebody to kind of be always there and
then it's a manifestation for you that they're seniors, right? Also, saying on this.
This is like the more senior you are, the less of your technical skills are growing and more some other skills are growing. And from what you asked, like what I wanted to say here is that then the thing is not so much that like I will say like, okay, you will now get more responsibility. Whatever the person is doing, they can already demonstrate this by themselves. Yes. Even if I have a senior engineer assigned to them that is technically, I don't know, a champion for whatever this project is that they're working on, they can still like manage their stuff on their own, so that senior engineer doesn't need to do anything.
Yes.
And that is then very visible.
Yes.
So they don't need to come to me and say like, hey, I want more responsibility. They basically can take it themselves.
Yes. Understood.
Like for most of the stuff. So this is like one of the things that you mentioned, but in general, it's asking like, what can they do better? We have this, fancy vague word called impact.
And there you mean in Microsoft, yeah?
Yes. Okay. That's kind of like what is usually measured for you, not like how many tickets or whatever, but like what kind of big impact you made. And the bigger the impact is, the bigger impact is expected from the higher level.
Yeah.
So the more impact you make. And then usually the question is more like, what can they do to create more impact?
Right.
And for that's
very reasonable and a very good metric, I would say, because it's not, as you say, oriented towards whatever amount of tickets you crunch, because that's a useless metric. Yeah. It's about exactly which impact you create.
But it's also very subjective.
Of course, yeah. But let's be honest, everything is subjective, but at the same time, well, kind of everything, but you can make it less subjective, right? Yes. By maybe cross-checking. That's why peer feedback exists, right? And these things. So they kind of help us not to be too biased. I don't know if you have cross-calibrations, for example.
We don't have,
in Microsoft.
We don't have this. What is cross-calibration?
Oh, yeah. So one thing is, let's say like this. The calibration within your team or direct reports is where you compare each engineer among each other, right? And again, it's a hard task, but you kind of have to, because in the end of the day, you want to make sure that each gets the salary or compensation, let's call it, kind of relative to each other in a normalized way, right? And now imagine there could be biases between teams. So yeah, I mean, it might work, by the way, in smaller companies. So I don't know how it works in Microsoft, but in Pacton, what we have is engineering leads from different teams gather together, and we have, let's say, a scoring system for engineers. And of course, as you say, it's subjective, but that's the best that engineering lead can do, right? And they compare kind of, they put the scores for each engineer in their team. But then we come together as engineering leads and we compare the scores across teams. And then engineering leads can challenge. Like they can say, look, here is Bob, here is Alice. And these are, by the way, fictitious names.
Really?
Yes. No, really. No, I mean, the names are real, but I made them up. So, and you could say, look, Bob in my team, I feel like Bob in my team is at least as strong as Alice. But Alice has 50% higher score, which means Alice will have 50% higher salary, or vice versa. Doesn't matter. So what's the matter here? And then you try to compare the scores and see. And sometimes you would calibrate. You would say oh, actually, let's try to normalize them.
We have something like that as well.
But maybe let's not go into this cross-calibration and things. This is more interesting for engineering managers, maybe. But I guess, again, going back to the topic of maybe we can try to be useful, let's say, for listeners who are trying to grow as engineers and they're trying to hone this good relationship with the managers and trying to understand expectations from their managers. And if they're hungry for growth, what should they do next? So maybe on an even more abstract level, even if we abstract away from Microsoft, what would be your advice for any engineers to how to hone this relationship and how to grow in this way better?
I will answer it in a bit not direct way to this last question, but you mentioned this very good word, manage expectations. Oftentimes managers unfortunately don't manage expectations well.
For their direct reports.
Yes. Even though they technically it's part of their job, but often this is not the case.
So to paraphrase, managers are not giving enough feedback or information to their direct reports, what works well, what doesn't work well, what they expect, right? It's not communicated well.
Often it's not really clear because the managers don't often understand it themselves. When I was early in the role, I was also feeling a bit lost with this stuff.
Right.
But clarity is very tricky because lots of stuff are very vague and subjective, and it's really hard to make it really crystal clear. So from that comes that lots of managers then don't make it very clear from what we discussed before. But what you can do as an engineer, regardless of whose responsibility it is, it doesn't matter. It's in your best interest to have things clear, and you can try to help your manager to make things clear for you. You can ask, what are the expectations? Let's say, depending on how stuff are in your company, we, for example, have these yearly rewards.
Yes.
And then you can ask, okay, so first, it's good to ask to understand how these things even work. Often engineers look at them as some mysterious stuff that somehow happens.
Compensation.
Yes,
right.
yes.
So what you're saying is it's okay for engineers to ask how compensation process happens in the company.
Yes. How works, how rewards, whatever it is.
By the way.
Often, maybe some companies are keeping it a secret. In Microsoft, it absolutely is not a secret, but I see so many times that engineers look at it as some mysterious voodoo magic. And I'm just surprised, no, it's not. This works this way. And you can.
I agree.
Engineers can ask their managers to understand how this works.
Yes. 100%. By the way, in Pactum, we have the same. It's transparent process. And I always even encourage direct reports to ask. And I would even tell myself how it happens. And they, 100% of the time, they appreciate it a lot once they see the transparency. But sorry, we can continue.
And then when you understand how this process works, then you can say, okay, so you have this, you mentioned, some calibration process where you put for me some score. So how do you determine this score? You can ask your manager, so what do you say it's my score right now? What do I need to improve what will make the biggest impact towards me improving this score? If I focus on only one thing, etc. And these are all really hard questions. Your manager cannot answer them on the spot. And
that's okay.
Yeah. And if you want to help your manager even more, you can say I understand that this is a hard question. Yes. I don't expect you to come up with an answer right now, but I want clarity on this.
Yes.
So please help me. And it's also in your manager's best interest for you to do well, because your manager's deliveries are basically your deliveries. Your manager, well, depending on the company, but often doesn't write this code, doesn't deliver the stuff that you do, but is responsible for the team to do it well. So if you do well, the manager does well.
Yes.
And if you help your manager, you will do better. You will understand stuff, and your manager might feel also better about you because like they learn something through these interactions with you. I know that like when I have like one-on-ones with people who are making really great points that are challenging me a lot.
Or active, let's say, during the conversation.
Yes. Even though it feels kind of like, at least to me from some perspective, a bit uncomfortable because I feel that I'm supposed to kind of be above this.
But it's great, right?
But I learn a lot from this, and like I appreciate this person a lot.
Yes.
And
I agree.
So absolutely.
So just to paraphrase what I learned from it is, as engineer, you should be in this active relationship with your manager. Don't expect your manager to hand everything on your plate, tell you how you can improve.
Yes.
And most likely, if you don't ask about, hey, let's talk about clarifying in which areas I can improve, or asking about compensation, then most likely, well, you will not talk about it because, well, maybe manager will talk about some other things that are on his mind. So yes, you should be active in understanding which questions you have that you care about, and then bringing them to your managers. And this is, by the way, the first thing you learn as a junior engineer maybe, is that the only person who is responsible for your career is yourself.
You. Exactly.
Yes. No one else, and not even your manager. I mean, your manager, of course, it's good and great when they help you, then you're very lucky. And if they can guide you, it's actually, I would say it's a wisdom of managers to help junior engineers understand that and also guide them. But let's say by default, it's still your responsibility. For example, if you don't like what you're doing in your team, it's your responsibility to discuss it with the manager. Look, can I do more of this in the team? Or maybe we even can talk about transitioning to other teams. Of course, you have to be careful. Again, not playing ultimatums, but being just, honest and have respectful conversation. Yeah. But yes, until you bring something to your manager, the likelihood that you will have like conversation about it is very low, right?
You might have amazing manager that does all of this stuff for you, but unfortunately, don't put those managers as a role on some pedestal. Most of them are just a human like you, and also don't understand, and things are not clear, and you can help them because you said this really good thing. You are the person who is responsible for your growth. So, and some other things just related to this. When you do come and talk with your manager, like it's some difference that I noticed between people. One thing is when you are kind of hungry, you want to grow and you are trying to find a way to work with your manager. And one, when you come with this like kind of complaining mindset, like, this is shit, this doesn't work, these libraries are so bad,
I agree.
These pull requests are what, I don't know what, like I want to grow, tell me what to do, kind of.
It's a closed mindset, right?
And this attitude is so kind of like toxic, and this will not get you anywhere. You need to look it from perspective. I want to grow. Like, what can I do? Like, if I need help from you, like, ask what specifically what you want. Like, hey, like, can you do this? This might help me. Or like, this is my opinion. Maybe you can share your perspective. Like, use your manager as a tool to help you, and not as a punching bag to throw all the stuff and complain, because
I agree.
You get more value otherwise.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's especially important if you, for example, well, let's say you switch a company and you start and you see many things that are wrong. Well, look at them as opportunities instead of complaining about it. Look at it as, wow, I have so many opportunities to make things better here. And even look at it this way. Most likely they hired you because, well, if you have skills to make things better, right, you're paid for it. Then don't complain about some things that, let's say, don't work how you expect them to. If you see opportunities, grab them, right? And not complain about what doesn't work. And this is completely shifts the mindset.
Yes.
I think this is an
with the
point.
Caveat, this thing actually is one thing that I had on my mind for later, but now that you mentioned it, especially if you are in a bigger company, this can be a bit of a trap, stuff that you mentioned. That if you see something wrong, you can go be there to fix it.
You have to pick your battles.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's a very good point. So many people come very enthusiastic and they take lots of extra stuff to do
and then they burn out.
Fix everything. They burn out. They work on things that nobody cares about or like you cannot really change because you maybe don't see like a bigger picture of how this fits. And then you get frustrated and you feel like, what's the matter? Whatever I do, it doesn't do like anything. So it's very important to like notice like what it is that it makes sense to try to fix. And this is also where you can talk with your manager to like align, like see like their perspective because they might have more information, broader picture. If you do something, how this will change the stuff. And of course, you can disagree with your manager. If you have very clear picture, you might be able to do something. But more often, I see that people try to do something from their like little box and it just doesn't work. And then they get very frustrated. Mm-hmm. Or even worse, then they focus more on that than or main stuff that they're supposed to work on. Mm-hmm. And then they do a lot of work that maybe even is great, but it's not relevant. Nobody like pays too much attention about it, and they are basically poor performer, even though they are like great engineer and have done lots of stuff. Mm-hmm. So this is like a very common trap that I also see with like people who are very enthusiastic and very smart and knowledgeable.
So let's say, I should paraphrase, let's say you join the team, you see many things where you can improve things and you have skills even to do it. So you're even more like inclined to just grab them. First, maybe slow down, pick your battles. You have limited energy and capacity per day, right? And you also have some responsibilities and expectations with your manager, right? Try to first do your primary goal or
focus on fundamentals.
Focus on fundamentals, right? Make things work, what is expected of your role, observe other things, right? And slowly start to also assess impact, right? And of course, then you can take more initiatives, take more responsibilities. But do it consciously, right? Kind of calculate what you're taking, picking your battles.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And always being in line with your manager, kind of keeping the feedback loop. Mm-hmm. If the initiatives you are doing, are they appreciated? Are you aligned on the impact it brings to the team, to the company? And if you do this, like carefully and consciously, then you have a good chance of success of, let's say, bringing a change to your team, to the company.
Yes, yes.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point that you brought. Yeah, because if you see a lot of opportunities and you just try to grab all of them, yes, it's likely you can burn out and you might be even considered as a poor performer, even though you're a great engineer.
Yes, yes. And that's like especially visible in like people who are like really, really smart and really good because they see so many things. They want to do everything perfectly. And then they invest effort into stuff that even maybe like majority of people that look from the side would say, yes, this is like the right thing to do. But for the company, it doesn't make any sense and nobody will value what you are doing as bad as it sounds. But it unfortunately sometimes like that company is a business.
Yes. So perfectionism is an anti-pattern for growth.
Yes.
Pragmatism is an antidote for that.
This like word, like very, very interesting thing because every person looks at it differently. So.
Yeah. But in the context of what we described.
Yeah.
Of course, in the context.
Perfect as in not doing everything to that it's almost impossible to do it better. Definitely not go for that. Mm-hmm. But to try to do things as best as you can and leave stuff better than you found them with not investing crazy amount of extra effort before consulting with your manager. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me see where we stand. So we talked about, early career engineers getting their first jobs, also treating maybe what we would call negative experiences, but in quotes, because they're actually, you can turn them to be positive experiences if you learn from them. We talked about relationship with manager and engineer relationship, right? It's a very interesting one and it's a two-way street. This is important for growth. Also clarifying expectations. You yourself as an engineer, and also it's important for manager to, bring this clarity eventually, right? Maybe not in the same meeting, but eventually to the person. What would you say are other important topics or themes or skills or knowledge to consider for engineers to grow in their career? It's an abstract way, and you can go anywhere you want. And this is exactly, I want to give you space to talk about what you think are other important things to know for people when they navigate their career, when they try to grow.
So far, overall, it was going around focus on fundamentals, observe, and try to like learn from what is around you. Maybe some stuff for like a bit touch upon what we already a little mentioned, that like the more you are growing, the higher level you go, the less your technical things are. Point about being a software engineer is that you are not a coder, not like a person who will close themselves in a basement and just like type perfect code like 24/7, make million tickets and everything is great.
I agree.
You live in a world where you work in a team. There are other people and whatnot. And especially in the bigger companies, point is most of engineers are intelligent people, like smart enough to make conclusions. But you cannot make conclusions out of air. You need to have some information based on which you are making conclusion. And the most successful, like really great engineers that I have seen in these bigger companies, where you even have this like higher level engineers, in smaller ones, you have some certain ceiling because maybe projects are smaller and whatnot. But when you have like this a lot bigger scopes, then these like higher level engineers, they are not usually, of course, there are exceptions, but usually they are not people who, I don't know, can write code faster than you, or I don't know some super special patterns or architectural whatever. But they,
even though this fundamental most likely is there, and
fundamentals need to be very solid, of course, but they don't proceed after that to some like crazy extremes. This is absolutely unnecessary. The biggest thing that distinguishes them between like maybe it's just a random senior engineer, like where you already kind of like have like solid fundamentals, can work on whatever self-sustainably, is that they learn about all of those systems that you work on. When you are in a bigger company, you have like complex systems, like they are usually not like, I don't know, use some random endpoint that returns some data, fetches some data. They're like a lot more complex. And this complexity, just like with these interpersonal relationships that we talked about, come to the same point of clarity. There is a lot of confusion and a lot of vagueness all around. And when you have a person who understands stuff and can help bridge these gaps between different teams and whatnot, PMs, whoever, about stuff that somebody wants to do, how you can do it, how this works with that component or whatever, like almost every engineer is smart enough to be able to like give some recommendations, explain stuff if they know what's going on. But my problem is that most of people don't know what's going on. They work on their little task, they do something there to complete it, they're done, they go forward. But the more time you invest into understanding what's going on, how this fits into the bigger picture, how this fits with the business and whatnot, and not just like I will write my cool class and whatnot, the more information you will have based on which you can create some conclusions and create extra value for people around you.
Yeah, I'm smiling, Joel, because this is honey to my ears. You're hired.
This depends where you are. In bigger companies, this is like a lot more relevant. If you are in some like this web shop company which like does work for somebody else, and usually it's, I don't know, create me some endpoint that will fetch some data, maybe change it a bit, write it back to some web page that will display it somewhere. It's usually, it's not so complex. Anybody can like just open the code, see what's going on.
But if you talk about any reasonably complex system.
Yes. Then most of people have no idea what's going on. And there is like so much confusion all around. Things are changing all the time. They are worked by hundreds of engineers.
I cannot agree more. And you know what you said is very interesting, that no one knows what is going on. And as you said, the task of high-level engineers, let's say above senior, is to learn about complex systems, clarify confusion, bridging gap between between teams, PMs, bringing clarity, alignment. And why it's important? Because to solve any complex problem in this already complex system, the main bottleneck is knowledge, right? It's not typing, it's not coding. You already have enough skills to solve problems locally. You know algorithms, you have fundamentals, you have everything. What you lack is the knowledge on these complex systems. And then knowledge is twofold. One is a knowledge of where your teams are who need to do the work, or if it's cross-team alignment, you need to have knowledge. What are the priorities of that team, right? Can they have capacity to help here, or do we need to do it ourselves? So it's a knowledge about the context of the company in terms of people, right? Because as you said, software engineering starts where, I would say there's a phrase, software engineering starts where two or more people work together, right? Because that's where collaboration starts. But now you have a lot of collaboration, so you need a knowledge on that, what's happening with people around and the resources around that, and the knowledge of the system, right? So technical knowledge of how things interrelate with each other, because they might be highly coupled, or even if they're loosely coupled, still there is interaction between them. And now it's a dance of all of this.
And also how it interacts with the business side.
With the business, yes. So you need first of all understand the business impact of what you're doing.
Yes, like you might have lots of different cases, exceptions, stuff that's negotiated with some customer and different with another and whatnot. It can be crazy mess of stuff there.
I cannot agree more. I think, so 3 topics that maybe to distill for listeners. So engineers on higher levels, but I would say you can start while being junior, actually. And not only
earlier
you should.
You start, yes.
Yes. So this is like a skill that the sooner you get to it, the better. And I would say you can develop this skill. It's like a positively reinforcing loop with your technical skills, because you can develop both almost simultaneously, let's say. Of course, early in the career, you will focus more on technical things. It's a challenging thing
because nobody teaches you throughout your childhood, the schools, how to learn. You come to a class which is designed, it has a book, everything is prepared for you.
Everything is known.
And you just need to go read this, understand this, and that's it. And even that, many students complain about. But here, you have stuff that's equally or more complex than your whole subjects in school, but there is no book, no manual, knowledge is spread all around, documentation is not great and up to date, let's be honest, almost nowhere.
Yes.
And you need to somehow figure out how all of this thing works. And while everything is also changing at the same time. And this is hard. This is not easy thing to do.
I agree. So, and it's about learning the complex systems, clarifying confusions. So you need to be a good communicator, talk to people, learn the system, which means you need to have good fundamentals. And you have to understand the business. You actually have to understand the domain. What are you doing? Why? What's the business impact? And you need to understand the end users or customers, who will benefit from it. By the way, I'll draw a parallel. I think this is it's a equivalent topic of what we discussed with Urgo in the first episode, but we did it from the lens of product engineering. Mm-hmm. But in the end, it's all the same. So, and Urgo said a very interesting thing. He said, the product engineering starts, I'm paraphrasing, but pretty much, product engineering starts where the comfort of your code ends. This is where now you don't own just the code because it's very cozy. Just, you care about your code and CI/CD pipeline and you release fast. It's very nice. You have unit tests, you have TDD, you perfected that. Perfect. Now get out of your comfort zone and understand what you're solving, what problem you're solving, and own kind of more of that, the whole, because impact starts there, right? To understand what to work on. And then, of course, technically, you need to understand how you do it. But the next level the next level from how you do it is what to work on. And so, I would even say the next level of growth, one thing is that when, let's say, you are given a problem as an engineering manager or someone that, hey, we have this problem in the company, help us solve it. I would say even higher level is to understand the business so well that you can generate initiatives and come up with interesting problems to solve yourself. Because this is the next level, right? Because someone thinks about the problems and what to solve. And of course, it's fractal. It trickles down all the way from CEO, CTO.
Depends on the company, how things work. But always, if you have something where you can really understand what relevant people care about or can make them care about it, and you can do something there about whatever that thing is, then yes, that's next level.
Now let's talk about, I think it's a very good natural progression. And what we know happens in the companies is, I would not call them wrong promotions, but not careful promotions of high-level engineers to managers. Let's say if it's not well thought through in the company and what consequences it can bring. So maybe first on a personal level, you yourself, you want to reflect over time. Are you operating best? And are you operating best by being individual contributor? And again, I actually don't like the word individual contributor because you never do it individually. You do it in a team and you collaborate. But let's say you're a contributor, right? You're an engineer. You're not a manager. Let's say you don't have direct reports. You don't have one-on-one, and you can hone this career, right? And follow this track. And I think one of the misleading thing that maybe many people don't know, I mean, let's say like this. I think it's a wrong choice to pursue management or engineering manager career and forward if you're just think that it's going to bring you more money. I think this will lead you to unhappiness, to nowhere. Like you can make more money as a staff software engineer or senior staff as engineering manager.
Absolutely.
And this is true, right? We know the compensation ranges, everything.
Absolutely.
So this is maybe advice number one. Don't assume that, if you're a manager, you automatically get more money. This is not true.
Absolutely not, yeah.
So optimize for maybe your strengths and weaknesses and what you like to do. But maybe you have comments about it, navigating, because you made a switch, right? How would you reflect on this? And maybe, it's an interesting topic to discuss. The fork of continuing the path of engineer versus the manager. And I'm sure Microsoft has its own philosophy around it, 100%. Yeah.
But first thing that I will address is the thing that you mentioned when you started this part of the topic right now. You said something in the lines of, let's talk about promotion from IC to manager.
It's not promotion, right?
as much as
very good.
I would say that IT is so much more advanced in terms of how to deal with people, etc., compared to many other industries. Like, unfortunately, lots of people still see this like manager as a promotion.
And by the way, I realized I said it, but I didn't mean what I said. So you're right. Thanks for catching me for that, because you're right. This is not a promotion. So it was a kind of a typo from my side. 100%.
It's a totally different role. It's a totally different role. And if you are in a smaller company where there is ceiling is quite low for engineers, you can be some senior, it doesn't matter what it's called, but you don't have much more scope that you can do. It might be really hard to be still an engineer and grow. Then maybe, you would look at, okay, maybe if I become a manager, I have more opportunities to grow to some higher managers and create more impact. But, if you like engineering, there are companies where the ceiling for engineers is really high.
Sky's the limit,
and
right?
Almost nobody gets there. There are very few people who get to the ceiling of what an engineer is in bigger companies like in Microsoft. Lots of people plateau a lot before that.
Yes,
because it's really hard. But the ceiling is big. And that role is
and it's good news.
Yes,
right?
and it's
the
good
fact
news.
That ceiling is big, it's good news.
Yes, it's a good news because you have lots of room to grow, and you absolutely don't have to become a manager to increase your scope or whatnot. Manager is absolutely different role.
100%. Yes, and as you said, it's very important not to view it as a promotion.
Yes. Yeah, wherever somebody looks this as promotion, I would say something is not right probably in that company.
Yes.
But I will say that with an asterisk, because I will not judge, since every company might have whatever philosophy they have. So stuff might actually.
I agree. By the way, in Pactum, we don't view it as a promotion. We have just different tracks. We call them different tracks. There's a lead, engineering lead track and the IC track.
Yeah. And so it's a different role. I don't know this was the first thing that I wanted to mention, but I don't remember what was your question actually then.
Yes.
How to transition or?
So let's talk about kind of the fork, right? So imagine you grow as engineer. Again, you strive for more impact. And now now imagine there are parallel realities. There's Bob and Alice, right? Bob has an inclination to, problem solve, going deep, solving engineering hard problems. And Bob seems to enjoy it. And, Bob, while liking to collaborate and talk to people, Bob can't really be happy by having one-on-ones with people, having managerial responsibilities. And now there's Alice, who actually sees her strength in kind of, in collaboration. She's an empath. She understands people well. She likes to help people grow. She can reflect very well, maybe even coach or like mentor a little bit. She finds this strength. She likes to collaborate across teams. So now we have Bob and Alice.
Okay.
So again, Bob likes to solve deeply problems, doesn't like one-on-ones or like doing it themselves as a managers. And now there's an Alice. How would you say they should proceed? But they are still, let's say, engineers.
Well, yeah, I would say that absolutely first you need to look like, what do you want to do? What do you like? It's in the end, like job is you spend pretty decent amount of time at your workplace and it makes sense that you do something that you enjoy.
Right.
If you haven't been a manager yet, you absolutely, of course, you don't know how this is going to be. You have your imagination, but it might be very different. And also the role is very different in every other company.
And so here I would say a conclusion is imagine Alice tries the role. She says, I think I'm good for it. And let's say there is an open position, right? There's an opportunity. Her manager sees, yes, it's a good role for Alice. Alice starts being manager. And let's say half a year goes by. Alice finds it dreadful. She doesn't like it. She doesn't like this thing of having direct reports. And now there is again a fork. And I believe one important thing to understand, there's no shame in, I wouldn't even call it backtracking, but there's no shame in going back to being an engineer and saying, look, I feel like this is not for me. I want to go back to being an engineer. Absolutely. Or, of course, because as you said, you learn on the go as an engineering manager, Alice could say, I'll give it still half a year a try, see if I can learn, get feedback, and then I will decide. But I would say, would you agree it's important when you become an engineering manager to really reflect often and evaluate and being honest with yourself, first of all, do you like it or not? And knowing that, you can choose even later on, even if you did 1 year of engineering management.
Absolutely. First thing, like before even you try, if you're interested, there is it's better to try because then you will know. And as we said, you can always go back. Just like if you're interested,
it's
try.
not even going back, right?
Also, that's a good point. Yes,
it's
exactly.
not going back.
going back to your previous role, kind of like from that perspective, not back as backwards. But going to becoming an IC again. It's if you're interested, it's important to try. Like I said, not just for this, for like anything in general, because otherwise you will always wonder later, what if? Like so try. And another thing is when you are an EM. Doesn't matter whether that's something that you end up liking or not. I think that you can get very good perspective of how things look from side of a manager. And it can broaden your perspective, open your eyes a bit more, and it can be very useful for you, even if you go and say, no, I want to be IC, I want to be engineer.
You can still learn a lot, right?
You can still learn a lot.
It's not a failure. It's a lot of learning.
Absolutely. And from you were mentioning that some people might look it as a shame, and I would say in our smaller organization currently in Microsoft, I think 4 people within like 2-3 years have said, okay, I don't want to be a manager, and went back to becoming an engineer.
Right.
And there was absolutely no issue with it, but sometimes it happens that it's also easier for them to progress further because you are forced a bit more to work on skills that are not so engineering and that are relevant for engineers, but engineers usually don't deal with them because they think I just need to code.
Yes.
So it can be eye-opening from that perspective. When I was now this time hired in Microsoft, actually the person who was who hired me was the person who was an engineer and then became an engineering manager of the team. And I was like, I don't want to be an EM, and then he hired me to replace him, and he reports to me, and he's a brilliant engineer. I don't know how he was as a EM. I don't think that he would be a bad EM, but I guess he didn't enjoy that. And so absolutely no shame on changing your mind, but absolutely worth trying it out if you are at all interested.
Yeah. Say if you have questions, what if? Then
go for it. Just try.
Yeah. Especially if the opportunity opens up in the company, right?
Yes.
Because it's also okay if, you don't have an opening, then if you like the company, better stay maybe at the position where you are right now and just, but maybe it's good to express interest to your manager.
Absolutely.
So that, right, it would be a wise thing to do, because then when there will be discussions among managers that, hey, we are trying to form a new team or split a team, then it'll be like, oh, Alice wanted to try.
Absolutely.
And I think that Alice would be a good thing. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing that I have, it might not be the general truth, but what I have noticed that it might be actually not so simple if you're like really interested and eager. I want to try to be a manager. The opportunity might not be like around the corner so easily. I have seen a lot of people who are like trying and talking with their managers for years before they maybe got an opportunity. I was lucky that I didn't have this situation, but from what I observed in my environment, it was not so easy, and it might be actually easier to, I don't know, go like do some kind of team lead stuff and maybe switch the company, unfortunately. But if you're not in a rush, you can express your interest, work with your manager to build some skills, and if there is some chance, then to try it out.
That was amazing. I really liked that conversation about the fork of IC and manager. And let's talk about the topic, which I think is very relevant. And it's especially talked now when, as you know, there are more layoffs, more optimization toward resources. And if you know also Gergely Oros, by the way, who is the author of the Pragmatic Engineer newsletter in Substack, if you know. But he talks about that there is a trend that engineering managers code more, just because in smaller companies, right, there are fewer people, they need to do it. But I'm just giving it as an intro to the topic of, and it's a very loaded topic, active coding for engineering leads or managers. And again, let's use these terms interchangeably. In some companies, it's called engineering lead, engineering manager, or engineering managers who don't code. I'll just start maybe with my opinions as well. I'll risk.
Go ahead.
But I want you, let's say, to challenge it and put your perspective on it, and then we can have maybe a good discussion about it. I believe it, and it ties back to what you said. The high-level engineers, and I think it kind of also works for engineering managers. They should understand complex systems very well, and they need to understand it in the level of abstraction to be effective communicators, to bring clarity across teams, to align roadmap, right, to solve problems, to help and facilitate to solve problems. Now, this will most likely depend on the complexity of the system and, your structure in the company, whether you need to actively code or not. This is just a means to an end. And maybe engineering leads should view it as means to an end. If you need to delve into coding once in a while, or maybe not even once in a while, but actively to always stay sharp in the system and to understand how things interrelate to each other, and it's useful for you to solve the problem, right? And to communicate these complex systems across teams, then go for it. But you might just as well be very successful in bigger companies like Microsoft if you don't actively code, but you're still effective in understanding these complex systems. But I want now you to, because we are sitting across each other, and it's a very good example because I'm actively coding. Again, my ratio is not, of course, is nowhere near as high as, let's say, engineers in my team, because they're doing it right all the time. I'm doing it maybe 20-30% of the time. But the invariant is still true. I always think about the complex systems that we have, and exactly, communication across the teams. But it would be very interesting to hear how it is for you in Microsoft.
Yeah, I don't actively code. I can start with that. But on a general topic, it's everybody has different opinions on what to do. And I would say that, again, it very much depends.
Yes.
if you're in a smaller company with smaller team, it doesn't even need to be a smaller team. If the system is not that complex and you can reasonably like understand details, contribute to code, it makes sense. Because in the end, if you look, you have like some fixed amount of time, energy, effort, whatever that you are going to invest
to solve some problem.
Yes, or like that you're going to invest in your work. And now your goal is to create as much impact as possible.
Yes.
And you need to look what do you invest this time, effort,
energy to bring this impact,
or
that's
like
very well
to
put.
maximize your impact. And in some smaller company, maybe if there is extra hands needed and there is not much other stuff to do, or like here you can create more impact, makes sense. In where I am in Microsoft, the systems are really complex. For me to be able to effectively deliver any kind of code, I would have to like very regularly a lot contribute to it. Otherwise, like there is no way to keep track with it.
Yes.
Which means that like 20% of coding is like absolutely no way. With 20% of coding, I cannot keep track on what's going on with
and
code.
The opportunity cost is high because you could have spent this energy on other activities that you assess bring much bigger impact to, let's say, solving some problem or impact, making impact in a
and if I would put it like on 10%, maybe I like can even reasonably invest 10% of time into coding. But point is that like if I invest 10% of time into coding, I'm going to be terrible at it. Junior engineers who have spent some time in a company will do better job than me. That doesn't matter how good or bad engineer I am. It's just that systems are so complex that you can't keep track with it if you're not regularly contributing it.
And that's a good point, because let's say Pactum, compared to Microsoft, is much less complex system. But much more complex than even smaller startups, right? It's already quite complex. But in our case, it still makes sense for engineering leads most of the time to be actively coding, because first of all, it's still like this contribution counts a lot. Like if you have plus one person who codes 35% of their time, and as a result, they better understand the system and can communicate better, like that's a big impact. But yeah, it all depends on the level of system.
Yeah, it depends. And I mean, absolutely, I agree that if a manager, the better they understand the code base, they have more information and perspective to like maybe help engineers, etc. But at the same time, they might be more biased towards some things just because they see it. So it's a trade-off.
Yes.
The more detached you are from it, the different perspective you may have. And especially when systems are complex, like here, you likely also need to have very skilled engineers. You cannot have like team full of juniors who are working on it, because they can't.
And then you can rely on senior or high-level engineers to help you and advise you. Now it comes with communication and collaboration, right? Where you can get their insights on, let's say, whatever estimation of how things are, and bring them in prioritization and roadmap discussions, etc.
You absolutely need to understand also, have like some fundamentals of like engineering, architecture, whatever.
You need to know the high level.
So you can communicate with them. You need to know like services, kind of roughly what they do, how they connect with each other. But for like more details, you can talk and rely on your engineers. In Microsoft, actually, the senior engineer is technically a tech lead. Even though we don't have official role called tech lead, but senior engineers expect to kind of act as tech leads. They just don't have this like one-on-ones, but they are like leading the project. They're supposed to understand what's going on and whatnot.
But to say again, and I want to it's an interesting point, do we align or not? But I think it's very, I would even say essential maybe for engineering leads to be rather very solid at system design, because they want to understand the system, right? And as you said, communicate effectively, because if they only know things on a shallow level and never had experience on operating on a system design level or designing any kind of more complex than like some simple system, they will have a hard time to actually have a meaningful, deep discussion with their engineers, right? And once they do, at least they should have had this in the past, this experience. They can leverage this to have very productive discussions, and knowing that they don't have to go into the level of abstraction of coding, but on the level of abstraction of system design, they can have a very productive discussion, right?
In general, I would agree with you. I had the same opinion. However, I have also seen examples of managers who don't have technical background and who were in like very technical teams where they can rely on their tech leads for this stuff, and they were taking care of the other things, and they were very successful.
Gotcha. That's where they leverage communication.
It's definitely doable without it. But in general, I would be inclined to say that, engineering leads, especially if they lead teams of engineers and not like somewhat higher, they would benefit a lot from having engineering background.
Makes sense. I want to talk the last topic before we wrap up, and that's Gen AI and LLMs in the context of engineering growth and engineering career. So, and let me start maybe with a preface, and I said it also with Urgo. I keep hearing that people are, especially early in their career right now, they're very confused about what skills should they get. And there's a lot of talk, LLMs and AI, Gen AI will get the jobs of engineers and all these things, which I kind of laugh about, because I know, well, as you said, the main job of software engineering is not coding, but it's communication, understanding business, understanding what to build, actually solving problems. It's not just coding. So, but what would be your assessment of current situation of Gen AI, LLMs in relation to growing as an engineer? What you should do to be successful in this rapidly evolving age of Gen AI?
I will put a disclaimer right away that I am not actively using much those tools, but I do try them out from time to time just to like keep track with them. I do like random coding for fun, like more regularly, but I'm used to my stuff. I know what I'm doing. And when I first time tried those tools, they were quite bad. So it was easier for me to do just things myself. But recently when I looked at them, they're already quite evolved.
Like even Copilot integration is very evolved.
Well, Copilot is even nothing if you look this like Cursor and,
exactly.
Claude and what.
By the way, I'll talk with actually my colleague from Pactum in the next episode. We have a planned recording soon about the AI tools in software engineering. And
like Tab 9, which existed before the AI craze, they had.
What is Tab 9? I don't know.
Tab 9 is kind of extension for editors. They were kind of like this fancy syntax helper or not, yes. But they leveraged AI long before that became a buzzword.
Right.
To give you smarter suggestions on fancy autocomplete, let's say.
Okay.
Which basically lots of these things are. But this one like worked really magically for me before like Copilot and any of these things existed. They have just improved right now. But these kind of things was like, for me, like very, very useful because it can help you be a bit faster with stuff you do.
Yes.
And that said, going towards your question is that if you don't know anything, if you don't understand what's going on, you don't know what even to say to this AI. And yes, one day they might be smart enough to read your mind and understand what you want, even if you don't understand what you want.
But we're not there yet.
But we are far from that. As fast as they are evolving, it's what people, I would say, then will benefit from is like understanding the fundamentals to get back to that. So right now, it might be even more important than for like anybody to understand some fundamentals of engineering. That doesn't mean that they need to like write some fancy code, but understand how to even like think in that way, because it's totally different way of thinking. I did a lot of also teaching of programming to people who are just starting. And very common thing that you notice is that they have totally different way of thinking and cannot even like understand some of the concepts initially. The mistakes that they make, and when you see like how they think, it's like you see that they don't grasp in the beginning even the concept of what is like a loop and how this works. This is like such magic to them.
Yeah.
And understanding this different way of thinking is something that I think would definitely help to utilize those tools better. And since today, not just engineers, but a random person can use those tools, they would benefit also from understanding this. This is becoming more and more as something that these fundamentals should be like, I don't know, learning how to write is norm for everybody. Like this, like some view of how engineering works, like these fundamentals would be beneficial, not just for engineers, for anybody, because then they can better leverage those AI tools.
And one, I would say it's learning the fundamentals of engineering. And as a next level, it's again the higher you grow in your career, it's about, again, communication, really understanding harnessing the power of collaboration, because that's a great power. And if you know how to harness it, because in the end, you realize you cannot solve all the problems alone. But if you can, I wouldn't even call it orchestrate other people, but collaborate with other people to solve the problem together, there's a big synergy in it. And if you can leverage that and also then understand the business and being a product engineer, that's where the impact is. And that's what AI, at least in the forthcoming future, in few years, will not take away, most likely, let's say. That's most at least likely, my assessment.
Even if the technology goes, I think that regulation will be crippling it down for quite a while until it can take over a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I don't know, even before this AI became so powerful, my view was always like, if robots come, cool, they can do all the boring stuff so we can deal with fun stuff. Even though now, like, they can, these AIs can be also quite creative, etc. And this is like a lot bigger topic, like how the structures with humans and society will function with all of this change. But if we could like have better tools to do boring stuff, that can be more cool for us.
For me, honestly, I view Gen AI just as a friend who will automate and help me with some boring things. And again, coding is just means to an end. And I mean, it will automate parts of coding, but you still need to understand the complex system, right? The system design skills will be relevant for a forthcoming future.
And minimal coding stuff. This thing still makes mistakes, or like, I don't know, doesn't understand some small details. If you can like look at those few lines that is generated and like understand what's written there, you can very easily spot, okay, this doesn't make sense.
Or
like, okay, here I can just change one letter and it might be more effective than like writing its sentences to describe what you want.
I agree.
So like
you have to know what you're doing. It's just a tool.
Yeah.
Actually, another topic, and you got me thinking about it, because you said you were teaching the programming, right? And I want to talk like maybe briefly, but still, I feel it's such an important topic in terms of growth, personal growth for engineers and anyone, is when you teach other people. And maybe I want to open it with saying that I believe, I have like such opinionated belief that it's important for engineers, and not only managers, but actually engineers, let's say at least starting from senior level and above, to learn, it's also a skill, to learn how to teach younger engineers, how to teach junior engineers, mid engineers. It's a very important skill and a cultural mindset in the company that senior engineers are raising junior engineers, and it should almost be a buy-in from the highest leadership levels that, we are building a process around it and helping senior engineers and training them to do it, and even, I would say, expect them to do it as part of responsibility of a job. And I believe it also brings a lot of growth for engineers when they need to teach something to junior engineers.
Absolutely.
Would you say this is the philosophy and culture in Microsoft?
I would say they often say like, we have a culture not of know it all, but learn it all. And yes, it's absolutely expected from more senior engineers to teach less senior, and like anybody, like to share knowledge and explain, and to add something to this, like as a like tidbit that like I noticed through this teaching journey, it comes back to this like question of clarity that we discussed already. The biggest skill for teaching somebody something for me was understanding what is it that doesn't make sense for them. Because we all see stuff differently. Like every word means different stuff for us. It's like an interesting thing from like neuroscience and stuff. If you say like, let's say car, we would all say like, yes, we know what the car is. But like, if you try to say like, but what if it has, I don't know, like 3 wheels, or it doesn't have this wheel? You will find then more differences where some people would say, it is a car or it is not a car. And if you then, when every word we see it differently, if you put sentences and stuff, it's like, it's like absolutely that people will see stuff differently and based on their culture and whatnot. And the skill to like understand when you say some sentence or like try to explain some point and person don't understand, like figuring out what is it that doesn't make sense for them makes it then like a lot easier for you to actually like say, okay, this thing that you view this way, if you look it actually this way, then this point that I was trying to explain to you will make sense.
I agree.
And this is for me was the most like important skill to like that helps a lot with teaching.
Right. And words are powerful, right?
Yes. And it comes back to that clarity, like forward anything, like kind of, yeah.
And you know why I brought it out? Because if you think about it, right, IT becomes more and more popular. And as you said, more and more come into this, to the field. So actually what happens, and by the way, the first person who talked about it was who I heard of, was Robert Martin, the Uncle Bob, or, the author of Clean Code. But he said an interesting thing. He said, every year, amount of engineers double. And he said, well, it means that people with more years of experience now suddenly become in a big minority. So you have more people coming into the industry who are untrained, or let's say, well, they might be trained in university, but still, even most of them are not. And even that, after university, you don't have experience. And it's very vital for all engineers and us in the industry to take in responsibility and know that, when we are senior engineers, it's our job to train junior engineers. And of course, it doesn't take away responsibility from junior engineers to learn and to have open mindset and to know that they can learn anything. They don't have to be afraid to ask questions, right? But it's important just as well for senior engineers to have this mindset. Why I'm mentioning this? Because I think there's a tough period in startup evolution of company. Let's say when you're a startup, you first hire many seniors, right? And you do it for a while, let's say for many years, before you become big enough to afford to hire juniors. Now, what happened? Imagine you are 5 years old company, a startup, still like a late stage startup. And you have, let's say, 30, for example, there's Starship, even Pactum, and others, right? So let's say you have 30 or so senior engineers. Now, these engineers in this startup, they got used to the fact that everyone around them is senior. So there's a certain culture, or I would even call it a habit built, that you don't need to train other people. And now it's important for leadership to make this shift. And it comes with communication, training, setting expectations, and say, literally gather everyone in the room and say, look, we are planning to hire junior engineers, and everyone will need to be involved. Now it becomes our responsibility to train them. They're not on their own. We need to make sure they're successful, and you senior engineers are a big part of it. And in performance reviews, we will evaluate your skill to teach junior engineers in your team. So I think it's important. And one thing I value, at least in my team, I say, look, let's look at the team throughput, not individual throughput, right? Because we're not lonely wolves. We are working as a team. And I think so I think there is this shift which doesn't come maybe even natural in these startups, right? Which for 5 years or longer didn't have junior engineers, but now suddenly they need to. And this is where I think there should be a strong engineering leadership to make this shift happen.
Absolutely. That's a very great point that you mentioned. I totally don't notice it since I haven't been in the situation, but it's a very great point. One thing that I would add to it is that it's good for engineers to always have this kind of like culture of sharing their knowledge, because senior can learn from a senior. Absolutely. You see something interesting that you did, something that you like struggled with, that you figured out. Like often engineers will either feel like, this was like some stupid thing or whatever. Share it. Somebody might know about it. Somebody might not know about it, and they can learn from you. The only thing that's different with juniors is that you can see that, okay, they might not have as much context and knowledge as you do. So you might need to explain more details, but otherwise nothing especially different.
I agree. All right. Let's wrap up. Thank you all for coming to the podcast. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to Map for Engineers, and see you in the next episode. To give you a little teaser, I might record the podcast soon with my guest, where we will be discussing AI in the context of software development. See you soon. Bye.